Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa College. Welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. Well, today I want to tell you the story behind why I built my business around neurodivergence inclusion. The short answer is simple. My son. When he was diagnosed as autistic with learning difficulties, I made a decision. I wanted to build a better world where he has the same chance to thrive in his own way as his sister does. And that's the job that my husband and I said we were signing up for when we decided to try for children. We wanted to help our kids discover what they're good at, give them the opportunities to make the most of it, and along the way, help them to become nice, contributing members of society. But there is a longer answer, and that's what I want to share with you today, because my path here to this business wasn't straight. In fact, I didn't even realize I was on a path. I certainly didn't set out to be a passionate inclusion advocate. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't against inclusion, of course not. I mean, on paper, I tick a few diversity boxes myself. I'm a woman, I live outside my home country, I've been temporarily disabled, I've been bullied in the workplace, and I care very deeply about other aspects of diversity that impact my life. My kids' guardians are gay, a member of my family is transgender. But despite all of that, I never really connected with the corporate diversity and inclusion programs that I was seeing around me, even though they were very active in the organization that I worked in. So when I got involved in neurodivergence inclusion and started to volunteer my time to chair the employee resource group and volunteer my experience to shape a vision and execute a strategy, I started to ask myself why. Beyond the fact that I hadn't had a neurodivergent son before, why hadn't I been more interested before? And I realized that part of the reason is the how. The method of inclusion that I was seeing and hearing about didn't sit right with me. It still felt like we were drawing lines, but just different lines, like we were expecting different groups to take turns being the underdog or being in ascendance. I'm going to take gender inclusion as an example. So first, women are excluded, and then we fight for women to belong. And suddenly some men start to feel like they're the ones being left out. And from the perspective of quotas for hiring, from the perspective of seeking a female candidate over a male candidate, I think the men are right. The goal's wonderful, I'm fully behind the goal, but what I didn't like was that it felt like we're passing the baton of exclusion or inclusion from one group to another. And when I went to women's leadership events, I could see the value. I'm generalizing now, but women tend to work differently from men. And when you're a woman in a male-dominated team, it's quite easy to feel like you don't fit, like the value that you're offering isn't appreciated. But instead of breaking down walls and building connections, it just felt like we were building different walls. And if I stick with this example of gender inclusion, it felt like we were saying it was either the typically male way of doing things or the typically female way of doing things, which was correct, which was desirable. And I don't believe that inclusion should work like that. It's not inclusive after all. I don't believe that my son's right to belong comes at the cost of my daughter's, or that my right to succeed in a team comes at the expense of my husband's right. I want both my children to belong in the same group, in the same society. And I want both me and my husband to be able to contribute to the same team, which we did actually in the workplace, and now we both still contribute to a different kind of team, a family team. But surely inclusion must be about everyone belonging at the same time. We shouldn't have to choose one group over another. Even when one group has been privileged for years and years and years, it can't be the right approach to punish it for that now. And that's why I never fully bought into DEI initiatives earlier in my career, even though I've always fully supported the vision. So when I understood that, I saw a related reason that inclusion efforts hadn't resonated with me. I thought that the tools we were using were too narrow and that they weren't optimizing for the best outcomes for people. A lot of what I saw in corporate DEI were point solutions. Fix the gender pay gap, convert a toilet into a breastfeeding room, adjust hiring targets, tick, 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 all important, all necessary, but not changing the culture underneath. None of these items seemed to have the ability to scale or to have the ability to change things sustainably. They all solve for one group, one issue. And of course, we have to fix the gender pay gap. And of course, women who are breastfeeding need to be able to pump in comfort and in privacy in their workplaces. I'm not disputing the importance of these steps as first steps, because they don't help everyone to thrive together. I also saw that these projects tended to be treated as multiple separate projects. So they split energy and resources, and it felt quite fragmented, like patching holes, instead of building something whole. So I realized that what I wanted was something bigger. I wanted to see progress from these point solutions to something more. I wanted to see inclusion as a foundation that everyone could participate in and everyone could benefit from. So when my son's diagnosis came, I learned about how neuro-inclusion was seen in organizations. And at first it felt like just another point solution. Request accommodations, ask for flexibility, hope for understanding, repeat whenever your manager changes or whenever you move teams. And so at first I got involved as a personal passion project, right? Because I wanted to have somewhere useful to divert all of the emotions that I was feeling so that I wouldn't drown. That's one way that I've always coped. I work. But as I started to experiment with a different way of being neuro-inclusive, of just putting things in place without waiting for someone to say they were autistic or dyslexic or dyspraxic or whatever, as I started to learn more and observe results, I saw something I didn't expect. It was something that intrigued me and something that I thought was really exciting. So applying a behavior in the workplace that I'd learned at home to help my son, that helped everyone in the workplace. Not only people who are autistic like my son, but literally everyone. I was completely unprepared for it. And at first I didn't understand it, although believe me, I do now. But being neuro-inclusive in our behaviors helped everyone. There wasn't any need to wait for someone to say, I'm autistic, here's my diagnosis, here's what I require. Enabling behaviors could be built in anticipation. We could learn from the needs of someone who's autistic or ADHD or otherwise neurodivergent and anticipate their needs by learning team behaviors to ensure that everyone could thrive, so that the neurostyle of anyone who joins a team can be enabled so that the team is ready for anyone who joins to thrive. Now, I know that the reason that everyone benefits is that everyone shares different degrees of a few different neurostyles. I know that now, I didn't know that then. Some of us are at an extreme, and in our society we say they're neurodivergent. But to a greater or lesser extent, we all share the same few cognitive characteristics. It's why people say we're all a bit autistic. No, we wouldn't all get a diagnosis of autism, but we all have more or less of the tendency to think in an autistic way, in an ADHD type way, and so on. So that's when I got excited about neuro-inclusion as a universal way to be inclusive, because it wasn't a special case anymore. It was real inclusion. It was fair for everyone. And there's a second reason why I could never get behind diversity initiatives as well. In my opinion, inclusion also has to help the organization to achieve its vision. Now, if we look at society, we do things because they're right. For example, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child says everyone has the right to be themselves, everyone has the right to have an education, everyone has a right to be safe and supported, and so on. And yes, of course, organizations should reflect these values. Organizations can be microcosms of what our society aspires to be. They can help to drive us forward. They can also be microcosms of what we should avoid, as many of us unfortunately know. They can be cautionary tales to be told. Regardless of whether they're aspirational or cautionary, organizations exist for a reason. They exist to create value, whether that's for their customers, their users, their investors, their donors, for whoever. And if our inclusion efforts don't contribute to that value creation or even damage that value creation, then it's fair to ask whether they belong in a business context at all. And it's not just about what you do directly in terms of an inclusion initiative, it's also about what you choose not to do so that you have the capacity to work on the inclusion initiative. Every strategic priority that we invest in is a trade-off in not investing in something else. So for me, the ideal inclusion effort had to be two things: inclusive for everyone, we've already talked about that, but it also had to be performance enhancing. So what about neuro-inclusive teams? Well, they offer both. Actually, I prefer the term cognitively inclusive teams instead of neuro-inclusive teams because it's more inclusive of neurotypical as well as neurodivergent team members. So let me explain now why cognitively inclusive teams, as well as being universally inclusive, are also the most effective way to boost performance. Now, in a cognitively inclusive culture, psychological safety is high. So team members feel comfortable expressing their ideas and asking questions and challenging assumptions without being worried about being judged. Collaboration feels energizing. So differences in the ways that we all think complement each other rather than clash. And that means that the team feels engaged with each other and motivated. The third characteristic is that communication is flexible. So team members use a variety of different ways to express their ideas, whether they're spoken, written, or visual ways. And they also adapt their communication style to include others. Fourth characteristic is that decisions leverage all of the different kinds of thinking styles that are available in the team. Instead of defaulting to dominant voices, the team actively seeks out all of the different viewpoints and considers different ways to solve problems. And that's the best way of improving the problem-solving ability of the team. Research has shown that. And finally, fifth and finally, in a cognitively inclusive culture, stress is low. There are clear expectations, there's a fair task distribution, and there are supportive team norms so that everybody can work in a way that aligns with their strengths most of the time. So in the way that I've described this cognitively inclusive culture, it should be pretty easy to see that when cognitive inclusion is missing, team members experience frustration. They easily get disengaged. They become misaligned with your organization's mission. It actually costs our global economy almost $9 trillion every year in that so many employees are disengaged from their corporate mission. That's close to 9% of global GDP. To look at it the other way around, when you focus on cognitive inclusion in a team, you build well-being. You get 68% higher well-being and associated lower absenteeism, 78% lower absenteeism. A cognitively inclusive team has 15% higher productivity and 10% higher customer loyalty, according to one report. Another report says that well-connected, cognitively inclusive teams are more than 3 times as innovative as teams which are not cognitively inclusive, and more than 5 times as likely to produce results. So this is a second reason why I'm so passionate now about neuro-inclusion, cognitive inclusion, to build the teams that are not only the healthiest for people to work in, not only the most fun, but also the most high-performing. And not by a little bit, but by the huge margin that I just shared. If we invest in cognitive inclusion, in building the capability of cognitive inclusion in our organization, it boosts performance now, and it boosts our ability to adapt to changes and keep performing in the future. And because so few organizations are focused on it right now, it's an enormous competitive advantage to those that do build this capability. So that's why I built my business around neuro-inclusion, because it meets both of the LISA inclusion tests. It's fair to everyone, and it helps organizations thrive. Now, if you recognize this situation, if you're curious about what cognitive inclusion could mean for your team's health and performance, I'd love to help. You can book a free consultation with me. There's no obligation. We'll just talk about what you're experiencing and see what Neuro-inclusion has to offer your team. You'll find a link in the episode notes, or you can go to my website, visit the Let's Connect page, and you'll find the link there to book the free consultation. If this episode resonated with you, then please share it on with someone else, perhaps someone who's also struggling with traditional DEI initiatives or struggling with their team health and performance. Thanks for listening.